Hello, I'm Scott Nelson, with the agronomist with the Iowa Soybean Association, and I want to talk to you about a systems approach for managing sclerotinia stem rot, or as farmers know it, white mold. Now, in 2021, we saw large outbreaks of white mold in certain parts of the state, which were kind of unexpected due to the dry summer weather patterns that we had. Now, white mold can be a devastating disease of soybeans. It's kind of thought of as a disease of high yield soybeans, in that high fertility and high plant populations create dense canopies that can favor white mold and lead to sometimes up to 60% yield reductions with white mold. Now, there's a lot of good information on white mold on the internet on things that control it, but all of these offer partial control. And what we're trying to do in this webinar is put together a systems approach for managing white mold that combines all these different practices into a system for managing this sometimes devastating disease. Most important thing I can leave you with, the most important thing to remember from today, is to be proactive in white mold. With white mold control. This field on the left that has white mold significantly killing off the plants, it's too late to do anything with this field. What you need to do, and what's very important, is be proactive with management practices to prevent white mold from occurring in the first place. Like I say, there's no single management practice that will give you 100% control of white mold. There's no silver bullet. But white mold requires an entire cropping systems approach. And we believe that with a combination of practices that offer partial control, we can get up to very good economic control of white mold, thinking of it from a systems approach. So the system components for white mold is genetic tolerance, cover crops and no-till, reducing plant populations, scouting, and chemistry. And I'm going to go over each of these in the following of the webinar. First of all, just to understand the life cycle of white mold is important. It's important to know your enemy. It begins with these sclerotium, which are hardened structures that overwinter and stay in the soil for a long, long time. This is one of the reasons crop rotation is not very effective in controlling white mold, is because these structures, these sclerotium, are very hardened and they can exist in the soil a long, long time. Now, there are biologicals that are marketed to control these sclerotium. Contans is one of them that is reported, the biologicals reported to melt these sclerotium structure. But it can be expensive, and it's very difficult to get enough mixing of the soil microbes onto these structures for them to act. And so contents can work, but in many cases it's very inconsistent results. To further the life cycle, so these sclerotium germinate into mushrooms, and these mushrooms, these apothecia, produce spores which get on the stems and flowers of the soybean plant. This infection can occur over several days or week in time, this infection period. And this is important to know, because this is what makes fungicide applications so difficult to time, is we may have good control at R1 stage applications, but later infestations can occur and still cause white mold. And the disease melts down the canopy, reduces yield severely, and produces more structures for the next season. So let's talk about a very important component of white mold management is genetic tolerance. Your United Soybean Board, your checkoff dollars have gone to fund research at universities to develop germplasm that's more tolerant of white mold. Currently, there's no 100% resistance in white mold. There's only partial resistance. And this field resistance that many soybean seed developers are selling is called disease escape mechanisms. These tend to be varieties that flower early within their relative maturity. They have upright stature and open canopies. They're least likely to lodge. They have good standability. it's important for you when you're selecting your soybean varieties to place, on the fields where you've had a history of white mold, to place the best varieties that have good genetic tolerance to white mold on these fields. Genetic tolerance will not give you 100% control, but it will help. I want to direct your attention to the effect of tillage on soybean, on Sclerotinia stem rot or white mold. The North Central Soybean Research Program funded some research on the effect of tillage on white mold incidence. And what I'm showing you here on the y-axis is disease incidence, white mold incidence, and on the x-axis is plowed, chiseled, and no-till fields. And what I want you to know is that no-till reduced white mold incidence by about half, which is significant. It does not get you down to zero, but like I say, no-till in combination with genetic tolerance, with other factors, may have an additive effect to reduce your populations of white mold and give you more economic control. Large SSR, large white mold infections can still occur in no-till soybeans, but they would be reduced compared to plowed or chiseled fields. Kind of controversial is among plant pathologists is the value of cereal rye in suppressing white mold in soybeans. Some studies have shown good activity of white mold, of cereal rye on white mold, while others have not. This is a recently published study where they compared the incidence of white mold on the y-axis with rye cover crop versus no cover crop. And what I want you to notice here is spore germination or mushroom emergence was dramatically reduced by a rye cover crop compared to the control. And you can see that the infestation was dramatically reduced as well. Now, it's important to know in this study, the cereal rye was roller crimp when it was terminated. So we had tall cereal rye, at anthesis or flowering that was rolled over with machinery. Now, that's not really common in Iowa to have that kind of to follow that practice for roller crimping. Most commonly in Iowa, we will terminate our rye with a herbicide, when it's gotten 6 to 12 inches tall. But an open research question we have is, will late terminated cereal rye, let it get to, 18 inches or so, will that have the same effect as roller crimping on apothecia or spore germination? Will this create a mat that will prevent that spore emergence and deplete the white mold incidences in the field? Anecdotally, I know many farmers in white mold areas that will tell you cover crops make a very large difference in reducing white mold, but it's been difficult for us to measure scientifically. The way it would work is with white mold is, like I say, having a big mat of residue on top of those mushrooms could prevent spore release or inhibit their germination in the first place. So our recommendation would be consider cover crops, but terminate them a little bit later. Let them get a little bit taller for control or suppression of white mold. The other component of a white mold system is to create an adverse canopy. White mold needs a lot of humidity and lush growth. Anything you can do to reduce humidity in the canopy will help. And that's done most easily by shooting for a final stand of 80 to 120,000 plants per acre in your most productive fields, or your fields that have the most white mold history. And like I say, these less dense canopies are less favorable to white mold. Now, research has not shown a large difference between 15-inch and 30-inch row spacing in reducing white mold, but populations have shown dramatic reduction. Now, I will comment here, these populations are lower than many farmers are used to and are not well planted with if you have a drill, you probably can't plant very well at these lower populations. So shoot for the lowest population you can for your equipment if you're using a drill, or if you're using a singulated planter, shoot for 80 to 120,000 plants per acre to suppress white mold in your fields. Scouting is really important, and this is one of the things that will give you the highest return on investment is scouting. And what you want to do is begin scouting just before canopy closure, and you're looking for these mushrooms in the field. If you see a lot of mushrooms in your field, then you know I better plan for a strong fungicide application to call it up. You know you're going to get the disease when you see a lot of these mushrooms. If you see less mushrooms, then you think, well, maybe I'll get by, or I need a less strong fungicide. It's kind of a decision that you have to make. But return on investment, you can know if you're going to have white mold by scouting. Lactofen is a herbicide, trade names Cobra, Phoenix, and there's generics. And this has been shown to reduce white mold by 40 to 60%. What it does is it upregulates genes for resistance to white mold. Now we think of these burner herbicides as just turning the plant all brown, but what we've recently discovered is that even low rates, a 6 ounce rate of Cobra or Phoenix will cause less crop response. It won't turn your soybeans brown, but it'll still upregulate the plant's defense genes and give you good control and give you some control of white mold. Research shows, in the research that's been done, is they've applied Lactofen at R1 stage, but some believe that these earlier applications can occur and still provide you good control or good suppression of white mold. Fungicides for white mold is a difficult subject. There is a website that every soybean farmer should know about called the cropprotectionnetwork.org. And at this website, university researchers have rated all the fungicides for control of white mold as well as other diseases. And I would refer you to this website so that you can understand whether there's a lot of fungicides that are labeled or marketed as controlling white mold, but the university data kind of puts this in from a science perspective. It rates them as for their efficacy. And every university scientist will tell you that Endura or Boscalid by BASF is the best fungicide for white mold control. However, it's very expensive, and you don't want to use it unless you have significant white mold or significant mushrooms in your production. If your fields during your scouting, you encounter a lot of mushrooms, then you may think about Endura. But if you don't have a lot of pressure, then you may think about a lesser fungicide and save more money. Fungicide timing can be difficult because the apothecia emerge at different times, and the spore release can range over a week or two. Applications of fungicides, what I recommend is at the R1 growth stage, and that means open flower at any node on the main stem. 2 applications are sometimes recommended by various pesticide labels, but in none of our research and none of the university research has it ever been shown that there's a very good return on investment for 2 application systems for white mold. So in conclusion, it's very, very important that you be proactive when you think about white mold control. Think ahead, and there's no single practice that's going to reduce white mold in your fields. However, combining genetic tolerance, cover crops, and no-till, reducing plant populations, scouting, and chemistry, you can provide better economic control of white mold and suppress this disease in a fairly simple way and cost-effective way. Now, we have a trial opportunity in our network of farmers that if you're interested in white mold, doing white mold research, please contact me for details at the bottom of this slide. And we're looking for cooperators that will do a cropping systems approach to white mold with us. Thank you for your time and interest.